Marcus, you know what? I'm feeling pretty generous today. Tell me, darling, if you had $1 billion, what would you even do with it? Go on, entertain us. Haha. His colleagues erupted in laughter. Diana, I'd probably start by not asking strangers to perform for my amusement as if they were performing animals in a circus. The table suddenly went silent. Marcus, excuse me? Do you have any idea who you're even talking to right now? Diana, I'm talking to someone who clearly can't tell the difference between actual wealth and wisdom. What happens next is going to leave you absolutely speechless. This billionaire is about to get a lesson he will never, ever forget. And trust me, you really don't want to miss a single second of this unbelievable story. Dear viewer, I'm asking you nicely to watch or listen until the very end and rate this story out of 10. Your rating will help me to give you even better stories in my future videos. If you're watching my story for the very first time, please subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell icon right now so you don't miss any of my daily news stories. Thank you so much, and let's jump right into the whole story. The crystal chandeliers of the Sterling Room were casting these geometric patterns all over the pristine white tablecloths. Each table was like a small island of privilege in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Diana Mitchell moved through this scene with practiced efficiency. Her black uniform was pressed to absolute perfection. Her silver tray was balanced effortlessly, like she'd been doing it for 15 years. At 39, she'd really mastered the art of being both visible and invisible at the same time. Present enough to anticipate the needs of the customers, but invisible enough to avoid any unwanted attention. Table 12 was just different tonight. Marcus Hartwell commanded the entire space the way billionaires often do. His $6,000 suit and his louder-than-necessary laugh was like he was announcing his importance to anyone within earshot. His three companions, 2 men in equally expensive suits and a woman draped in diamonds, were just hanging on his every word as he regaled them with stories of his latest business moves. $17 million for a company that was basically circling the drain, Marcus announced, swirling his scotch. I gutted the entire executive team, restructured the whole operation, and flipped it for $43 million in just 8 months. That's how you do business, gentlemen. Diana refilled water glasses with precision, her movements designed to be totally unobtrusive. She'd learned a long time ago that wealthy people often forgot that service staff were actually human beings, capable of hearing, thinking, and feeling. It was simultaneously the worst and best part of her job. Worse because of the casual cruelty it enabled, but best because she'd learned more about business and human nature than any classroom could ever teach her. The secret, Marcus continued, pointing his glass at his companions, is knowing that sentiment is the enemy of profit. People get way too attached to brands, to legacies, to employees who've been there since day one. That's just weakness. You want to succeed? You cut the dead weight and maximize returns. It's just simple mathematics. One of the other men laughed. Cold-blooded, Marcus. I love it. Not cold-blooded, realistic. The world rewards the people who make the tough decisions. Just look around this room. Marcus gestured broadly, nearly hitting Diana as she stepped back. Everyone here got where they are by being smarter, working harder, and just refusing to let emotion cloud their judgment. Success leaves clues, and the clue is this: winners win because they deserve to. Diana's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd heard variations of this speech 1,000 times in this restaurant. The mythology of meritocracy, delivered with absolute conviction by people who had inherited wealth, attended elite schools through family connections, and called it earning what they had. She said nothing. Of course, she needed this job. Miss! Marcus snapped his fingers without even looking up. Another bottle of the Chateau Margaux, and this time, make sure it's properly aerated. The last glass was practically undrinkable. Diana had personally supervised the decanting just 30 minutes earlier, following the sommelier's precise instructions. The wine was perfect, but contradicting a customer like Marcus Hartwell was basically professional suicide, so she simply nodded. Of course, sir. My apologies. As she turned to leave, she overheard Marcus mutter to his companions. You have to tell them everything. It's like they're not even trained anymore. The sommelier, Antoine, gave her a sympathetic look when she reached the wine station. Hartwell being difficult. When isn't he? Diana kept her voice neutral. Antoine was kind, but in a restaurant like this, word traveled fast. Any complaint, any perceived attitude, could reach management and cost her her job. The man has more money than God and the manners of a spoiled child, Antoine said, carefully decanting a fresh bottle, despite knowing the first one had been flawless. But his money spends well, so we smile and nod. Yep. Diana carried the wine back to table 12, where Marcus was now holding court on cryptocurrency markets. She began to pour, starting with the woman to Marcus's right, when Marcus suddenly thrust his glass forward, causing Diana to shift quickly to avoid spilling. Priorities, sweetheart, Marcus said with a smirk. Client first, then the supporting cast. Heat rose in Diana's cheeks, but she pivoted smoothly and filled Marcus's glass first. Of course, sir. Now, that wasn't so hard, was it? Marcus took a sip and made an exaggerated face of contemplation. Yes, much better. See what happens when you just pay attention? The wine was identical to the first bottle, but Diana had learned that people like Marcus needed to be right more than they needed to be accurate. She finished serving the table and retreated, feeling Marcus's eyes following her. You know what I find really fascinating? Marcus announced to his table, his voice deliberately loud enough for Diana to hear as she moved to the service station. The psychology of service workers. What kind of person chooses to spend their entire life refilling glasses and clearing plates? What does that say about their ambition, their drive, their initiative? One of his companions shifted uncomfortably. Marcus, come on. No, I'm serious. We're just surrounded by people who've essentially given up, who've accepted mediocrity. And I genuinely wonder, were they born without ambition, or did they just stop even trying? He leaned back, warming to his theme. Because in my experience, successful people and unsuccessful people are separated by just one thing, the willingness to do whatever it takes. Winners write their own destiny. Everyone else just serves drinks. Diana's hands stilled on the tray she was organizing. 15 years. 15 years of swallowing her pride. Of accepting disrespect with a smile. Of being talked about like she wasn't even human. 15 years of night classes, certification programs, and studying until her eyes burned. All while working double shifts just to keep food on the table and her daughter in school. She thought about walking away. She really should just walk away. But something in Marcus's smug, self-satisfied expression made the decision for her. Diana squared her shoulders and walked right back to table 12. Marcus was mid-laugh when Diana stopped beside his chair, her presence quiet but unmistakable. The conversation just stuttered to a halt as 4 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Is there a problem? Marcus asked, his tone carrying an edge of annoyance mixed with amusement. Did we forget to say please? No, sir. Diana's voice was steady, completely professional. I wanted to apologize if our service hasn't met your expectations this evening. Marcus exchanged glances with his companions, his expression suggesting he'd just been proven right about something. Well, that's actually refreshing. Accountability. I appreciate that. Though I have to say, the bar for service in this city has really declined. Even at places charging these prices, you just can't count on basic competence anymore. I understand your frustration, Diana continued, and something in her tone made Marcus look at her more closely. Service work requires attention to detail that many people overlook. For instance, the Chateau Margaux you're drinking is a 2015 vintage with a market value of approximately $1,800 per bottle. It was decanted at 7:47 p.m. exactly 32 minutes before I served it at a room temperature of 64 degrees Fahrenheit, which is optimal for that particular vintage. The first bottle was identical to the second in every single measurable way. The table went completely silent. Marcus's smile faltered just slightly. Now, regarding your observation about ambition and drive, Diana continued, her voice never rising above a conversational volume. You mentioned that successful people write their own destiny. That's an interesting perspective from someone whose first major business opportunity came from a $15 million loan from his father's private equity firm. Public record, by the way, the SEC filing is actually quite detailed. Marcus's face began to redden. How dare you? I'm not finished. Diana's interruption was polite but firm. You also mentioned that winners make tough decisions. According to the Wall Street Journal article from 3 weeks ago, your $17 million acquisition involved liquidating the pension fund of 247 employees who'd been with that company for an average of 19 years. You restructured by eliminating their retirement savings and their positions, and then sold the gutted company at a profit while those families scrambled to figure out how they'd even survive. One of Marcus's companions, the woman in diamonds, had gone pale. The two men just stared down at their plates. You want to know what separates successful people from unsuccessful people? Diana's eyes met Marcus's directly. From where I'm standing, it's not work ethic or intelligence, or even opportunity. It's often just a willingness to sleep soundly while other people pay the price for your choices. Marcus's hand tightened around his wine glass. Do you have any idea who you're talking to right now? I could have you fired with a single phone call. I could make sure you never work in this city ever again. You could, Diana acknowledged. And that would be just another example of someone with power using it to silence people who make them uncomfortable. But before you make that call, let me save you some time on the financial advice you were about to ask for. I wasn't going to, Marcus started. But Diana saw the truth in his eyes. She'd watched him sizing her up for the last 10 minutes. Working up to whatever humiliating joke he planned to make at her expense. Yes, you were, Diana said simply. I've been serving tables in restaurants like this for 15 years. I know the pattern. Wealthy man has a little too much to drink, and then decides it would be just hilarious to ask the help for some financial advice. Expects humble gratitude or desperate ideas he can mock with his friends. It's a power play dressed up as generosity, and I'm just tired of pretending I don't see it. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is outrageous. Where's your manager? This is completely unacceptable. Michael is in the back office, Diana replied calmly. Would you like me to go get him? Or would you prefer to hear what I would actually do with $1 billion? Because despite your assumptions, I do have thoughts on the matter. Informed ones. Something in her composure gave Marcus pause. His companions were watching him, waiting to see how he'd handle this unprecedented rebellion from a member of the service staff. He'd positioned himself as the dominant figure at this table, in this restaurant, in every single room he entered. Walking away now would undermine that carefully constructed image. Fine, Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Entertain us. Tell us what brilliant financial strategy you've been developing while fetching wine. This should be absolutely fascinating. He sat back down, arms crossed, his expression just daring Diana to make herself look foolish. His companions shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. Diana set her tray on a nearby service stand with deliberate care. $1 billion represents approximately $17 million per year if you're targeting a conservative 6% return through a diversified portfolio. Most people immediately think about luxury purchases or aggressive investments, but that's just emotional spending, not strategic wealth management. Marcus snorted. Thank you for the basic mathematics lesson. Are we done here? The first thing I'd do, Diana continued as if he hadn't even spoken, is establish a series of irrevocable trust structures to minimize estate tax exposure while maximizing generational wealth transfer. Given current tax law, you're looking at a 40% federal estate tax on anything above the $12.9 million exemption. Proper trust structures, GRATs, CRUTs, dynasty trusts, can reduce that exposure to single digits. Marcus's smirk began to fade. Those weren't terms casual observers knew. Second, I'd diversify across uncorrelated asset classes. 30% traditional equities, 20% fixed income, 15% real estate, but not just commercial properties. I'm talking about opportunity zone investments where you can defer and potentially eliminate capital gains while gentrifying developing, distressed communities. Diana's tone made her feelings about that particular strategy pretty clear. Then there are alternative investments. 15% in private equity, 10% in hedge funds with proven management teams, Bridgewater's Pure Alpha or Renaissance's Medallion Fund if you can get access, and 10% in tangible assets. Art, rare collectibles, even classic cars can provide both appreciation and insurance against market volatility. The woman in diamonds leaned forward slightly. Her interest was clearly piqued despite the awkwardness of the situation. One of the men pulled out his phone and began typing notes. Marcus's jaw had tightened, but he remained silent. "But here's where it gets interesting," Diana said, warming to her subject despite knowing she was probably ending her employment with every single word. "The real question isn't how to preserve or grow $1 billion. That's relatively straightforward for anyone with competent advisors. The real question is, what's the money for?" Marcus made a dismissive gesture. "Spare me the philosophy lecture. Money is for security, freedom, and enjoying life. Not exactly complicated." "True," Diana acknowledged. "But security and freedom for whom? Just yourself, your immediate family? Or does wealth come with responsibilities that extend beyond personal gratification?" She paused. "Those 247 employees whose pensions you liquidated, they thought they had security too. They worked decades building someone else's dream, trusting the system would take care of them. Then someone with more power decided their security was worth less than his profit margin. That's business," Marcus shot back. "If they wanted security, they should have taken responsibility for their own financial futures instead of depending on a company pension. Personal responsibility. Remember that concept?" "I do," Diana said quietly. "I also remember that those pension promises were part of their compensation packages. They took lower salaries in exchange for retirement security. They made a deal in good faith, and someone with power broke that deal because he could. That's not business. That's betrayal dressed up in corporate language." One of Marcus's companions cleared his throat. "Maybe we should." "No." Marcus's eyes never left Diana's face. "I want to hear this. Clearly, our waitress has opinions about how wealth should be managed. Please continue. Tell me how I should use my money. I'm just dying to hear this." Diana recognized the trap. He was giving her rope to hang herself with, expecting her to advocate for charitable giving or wealth redistribution, easy positions to mock as naive or socialistic. But Diana hadn't spent 15 years observing the wealthy without learning how they actually thought. "I'm not going to tell you to give your money away," Diana said. "Philanthropy can be valuable, but it's often just wealthy people buying indulgences, while the systems that created their wealth continue to grind down everyone else. No, if I had $1 billion, I'd invest in creating systems that actually work." "How inspirational," Marcus said sarcastically. "And how exactly would you create these magical systems?" "Start with education," Diana replied. "Not by building another university with my name on it, but by funding free, high-quality vocational training programs in distressed communities. Everyone talks about the skills gap, but nobody wants to pay to close it. 4-year degrees aren't for everyone, but 6-month training programs in coding, healthcare, tech, advanced manufacturing, those can transform lives and fill real market needs." She was aware of the other diners now, several tables listening to this unprecedented exchange. The restaurant had grown quieter, staff and patrons alike watching this collision between classes. "Partner with companies that commit to hiring program graduates at living wages," Diana continued. "Create a pipeline from education to employment that doesn't require going into 6-figure debt. That's not charity. That's investing in human capital with measurable returns for everyone involved. And I suppose you track outcomes, measure success rates, adjust programs based on data." Marcus's tone was challenging, but something had shifted in his expression. He was actually listening. Now, obviously, any investment without performance metrics is just throwing money away. You'd need quarterly reviews, employment tracking, wage progression data, and you'd need to be willing to shut down programs that don't work and expand ones that do. Evidence-based decision-making, not feel-good gestures. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Diana with new intensity. "What else?" "Affordable housing development, but not the kind that becomes tomorrow's slums," Diana said. "Mixed-income communities with actual amenities, good schools, accessible healthcare, reliable transportation. Most affordable housing fails because it concentrates poverty and provides no path forward. You want sustainable communities? Mix income levels, invest in infrastructure, create opportunities. That's expensive. One of the other men interjected. The returns would be minimal. The financial returns would be modest, Diana agreed. But the social returns, reduced crime, improved health outcomes, increased economic mobility, those create value that eventually converts to financial stability. Healthy communities spend less on emergency services, incarceration, and social programs. That's taxpayer money being saved, which means economic growth, which means everyone benefits. Marcus's expression had transformed from angry to calculating. You're talking about impact investing, long-term value creation through social infrastructure. I'm talking about enlightened self-interest, Diana corrected. The myth that your success is completely independent of the community around you is just that, a myth. You drive on public roads, rely on educated workers, depend on stable social systems. When those systems fail, everyone pays the price, including billionaires. Gated communities only work until they don't. The woman in diamonds spoke for the first time. Where did you learn this? Diana met her eyes. Columbia Business School, part-time MBA program. It took me 7 years working full-time to finish, but I graduated last spring with a concentration in sustainable development and impact investing. Before that, I had a BS in economics from Hunter College, which took 6 years because I could only afford 2 classes per semester. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's face had gone through several color changes. Red from anger, pale from shock, now settling into something harder to read. His companions stared at Diana with expressions ranging from amazement to discomfort. You have an MBA from Columbia, Marcus said slowly, and you're working as a waitress. I have an MBA from Columbia, student loans that would choke a horse, a 14-year-old daughter in private school, and a mother with stage 3 kidney disease who needs regular dialysis. Diana replied matter-of-factly. This job provides health insurance, predictable hours that let me be home when my daughter needs me, and enough income to cover our expenses if I'm careful. The MBA was an investment in my future. But right now, my present requires stability more than ambition. Why didn't you? The woman started, then stopped, perhaps realizing the question revealed her own assumptions. Why didn't I get a corporate job? Use my degree? Diana smiled without humor. I applied to 247 positions during my final year of school. Got 17 interviews. Want to guess how many offers I received? Nobody spoke. 0. And before you assume it was a qualifications issue, my GPA was 3. I had excellent recommendations from professors. I'd done 2 summer internships, including one at a nonprofit that managed a $50 million endowment. On paper, I was exactly what those companies claimed to want. Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. For perhaps the first time in the conversation, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Here's what actually happens, Diana continued, her voice level but carrying an undercurrent of exhaustion. You walk into that interview room, and you can see the moment they realize you're not what they expected. Sometimes it's subtle, a flicker in their expression, a shift in body language. Sometimes it's obvious. They actually check the resume again, like maybe there's been a mistake. One of the men started to protest, but Diana cut him off. That's reality. I had one interviewer spend 20 minutes asking about my diverse perspective and how I'd contribute to their inclusion initiatives. Another asked if I was sure I'd be comfortable in a fast-paced, demanding environment. One actually told me I was overqualified for the position, an entry-level analyst role I was applying for with my MBA. When I asked what additional qualifications would make me appropriately qualified, he couldn't answer. She saw a recognition flicker across the face of the woman in diamonds, acknowledgement that perhaps this wasn't just theoretical for her either. The final straw was an interview with a hedge fund, Diana said. I made it to the 3rd round, met with a partner who seemed genuinely impressed. Then he took me to lunch at a place not unlike this one. Spent the entire meal asking personal questions. Where did I grow up? Was I married? Did I have family support? Finally, he said, I want to be honest with you, Diana. You're brilliant. Your work is excellent, but our clients are very traditional. They expect a certain presentation. I'm just not sure you'd be the right fit for client-facing work. What did you say? The question came from Marcus, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. I thanked him for his time and his honesty. Then I went home and cried for 3 hours before picking up my daughter from school. Diana's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes betrayed the cost of that memory. After that, I stopped pretending the system was going to reward merit and credentials alone. I needed income, stability, and benefits. This job provides all three. Marcus swirled the wine in his glass, staring into it like it might contain answers. I didn't realize. I've heard about these issues, but I just assumed they were exaggerated. Media narratives, you know. Of course you did, Diana said without hostility. Why would you think otherwise? Your experience has been that credentials and competence get rewarded. The system has worked exactly as advertised for you. So, when someone says it doesn't work for them, the natural assumption is that they're doing something wrong. But Mr. Hartwell, has it occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, your experience isn't universal? One of the men at the table shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I serve on the diversity committee at my firm. We've implemented blind resume reviews, structured interviews, bias training. That's good, Diana interrupted genuinely. Those things help, but they don't change the fundamental calculus that who you know, who vouches for you, and who sees themselves in you still matters more than any credential. You want to know why I'm still serving tables instead of managing portfolios? Because nobody in that world saw me and thought, future colleague. They saw someone who might fill a diversity quota or check a box for their annual report. Marcus set his glass down with careful precision. So, when I was pontificating about merit and success, about how winners make their own destiny, you're describing a system that mostly applies to people who already started several rungs up the ladder. Diana finished. Look, I don't doubt you've worked hard. Most successful people do. But hard work plus opportunity creates success. Hard work alone just creates exhaustion. The restaurant had returned to its normal volume. Other diners losing interest in a conversation that had become more contemplative than confrontational. But at table 12, nobody moved a muscle. The dynamic had undergone such a complete transformation that the 4 affluent diners now appeared as if they were students, and Diana, their insightful instructor. The 247 employees whose pensions you liquidated, Diana said softly, circling back to her initial point. I'd be willing to bet that the vast majority of them worked incredibly hard, showed up every single day, performed their jobs to the best of their ability, followed the rules they were given, and then someone with more power than them determined that their years of dedicated labor were worth less than maximizing shareholder value. You asked what separates successful people from unsuccessful people. From where I'm standing, it often boils down to who wields the power to make those life-altering decisions versus who has those very same decisions made about them. Marcus' jaw tensed, working silently for a fleeting moment. I never actually thought about it quite like that. Most people don't, Diana said with a knowing look. We're all the heroes of our own stories, right? Nobody ever truly believes they're the villain. You likely see yourself as a smart businessman making difficult, yet necessary calls. Those workers probably see you as the person who essentially stole their retirement. Both perspectives contain elements of truth, but only one perspective gets the privileged label of just business. The woman adorned in diamonds spoke up once more, her voice now tinged with thoughtful introspection. So, if you had that $1 billion, you would have invested in systems designed to provide more individuals with the opportunities that were denied to you. Not denied, simply delayed. Diana clarified, ever the pragmatist. I'm not giving up on putting my MBA to good use. I'm simply building a solid foundation first. My daughter needs to finish school, my mother requires ongoing care, and my loans need to be carefully managed. But I'm also actively creating a network, learning firsthand how wealth truly operates from the inside. She subtly gestured around the upscale restaurant, and strategically positioning myself for when the right opportunity inevitably presents itself. That's remarkably patient. One of the men at the table observed, impressed. Most people would be consumed by bitterness. Diana laughed, the sound ringing with genuine amusement. Oh, I'm definitely bitter. Make no mistake about that. I'm just also incredibly pragmatic. Bitterness doesn't exactly pay the rent, now does it? And honestly, working here has taught me invaluable lessons that no classroom ever could. I've witnessed million-dollar deals get finalized over dessert, seen marriages crumble between the appetizer and the entree, observed how the truly wealthy think about money compared to how virtually everyone else does. This job is essentially like an anthropology study of the upper class, except I actually get paid minimum wage plus tips to conduct my in-depth research. Marcus looked at her with an expression bordering on respect. You're essentially turning service work into high-level market research. I'm turning service work into survival with a healthy side of education. Diana corrected him with a subtle smile. But yes, I pay close attention to everything. You'd be absolutely amazed at what people casually reveal when they forget that the staff are, in fact, human beings fully capable of hearing and understanding them. The weight of that profound observation settled over the table like a dense morning fog, cold, penetrating, and impossible to ignore. Marcus slowly picked up his wine glass, then hesitated and set it back down without taking a sip. One of his companions nervously checked his watch with obvious discomfort, clearly calculating how to gracefully exit this dinner that had abruptly transformed from light-hearted entertainment into a rigorous moral examination. I need to apologize, Marcus said finally, the words seemingly extracted with considerable effort. What I said earlier about service workers, about ambition and supposed mediocrity, that was ignorant and deeply offensive. I made sweeping assumptions based on absolutely nothing but my own severely limited perspective. Thank you, Diana said simply, acknowledging his apology. Though, if I'm being perfectly honest, apologies are invariably easier than actual lasting change. You'll leave here tonight, go back to your privileged life, and perhaps feel vaguely bad about this conversation for a few days. But will anything truly be different in the long run? Marcus visibly flinched as if she'd physically struck him. That's not entirely fair. You can't realistically expect one single conversation to what? Change fundamental worldviews overnight? Restructure deeply ingrained beliefs about the very notions of merit and success? You're absolutely right. I can't expect that, Diana conceded, picking up her tray to signal the conversation's imminent conclusion. But here's something I'd like you to consider moving forward. Every single person you encounter in your daily life is carrying a complex story that you know absolutely nothing about. Every server, janitor, cashier, and receptionist. They're all complete human beings with hopes, dreams, disappointments, and circumstances that you can't possibly see from your privileged vantage point. Maybe the real change isn't necessarily in how you allocate your immense wealth. Maybe it genuinely starts with simply remembering that basic, fundamental truth. She began to turn away, but Marcus' voice stopped her in her tracks. Wait, please. Diana paused, her expression carefully neutral and unreadable. Marcus pulled out his expensive wallet and extracted a sleek business card. He held it for a moment, then grabbed a pen and scribbled something quickly on the back before extending it towards Diana. This is my direct office line. The number on the back is my personal cell. I'd genuinely like to continue this conversation if you're willing to do so. Diana looked at the card without actually taking it from him. Why? Because you're right about almost everything, Marcus admitted, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his voice. Because I've spent my entire career operating under the staunch belief that success was purely and simply a function of talent and raw determination. And you've just comprehensively demonstrated why that simplistic view is, at best, fundamentally incomplete. He hesitated, his gaze softening. Because I have a daughter, too. She's 12 years old, and I desperately want her to grow up in a world that recognizes her inherent merit regardless of what she looks like or where she happens to start in life. Which means I need to truly understand how the world actually works, not just how I've personally experienced it through the lens of my own privilege. Diana studied him carefully, searching for any telltale signs of insincerity or manipulative performance. But Marcus met her unwavering gaze steadily, his earlier arrogance now replaced by something that looked remarkably like genuine discomfort with himself. "I'm not looking for charity," Diana said cautiously, testing the waters. "If this is some kind of guilt-driven gesture, it's not something I'm interested in." "It's not," Marcus interrupted her firmly. "Or maybe it is partially driven by guilt, but that's definitely not the main thing here. You possess an MBA from Columbia and 15 years of acutely observing how wealthy people think and operate. You understand complex systems in ways that most of my highly paid consultants simply don't because you've actually seen both sides of the equation. That's an incredibly valuable perspective to have. I'm not offering you a job out of some misplaced sense of pity. I'm suggesting we talk further because you clearly possess insights that I desperately need to hear." The woman adorned in diamonds leaned forward slightly, adding her own perspective. "Marcus is on the board of the Hartwell Foundation. It's his family's charitable trust, which holds about $600 million in assets. They've been struggling immensely with impact measurement and accurately assessing program effectiveness. If even half of what you said tonight about sustainable investment and community development is legitimate, which it undoubtedly is," Diana said firmly, "then you might very well be exactly the kind of fresh, innovative thinking they desperately need." The woman extended her own card towards Diana. "I'm Rebecca Chun, CEO of Meridian Capital. We specialize in impact investing and social venture funding. I'd be extremely interested in discussing your perspectives on community development finance in greater detail." Diana took both cards, her expression carefully controlled and betraying absolutely nothing even as her mind raced with a whirlwind of possibilities. This was either an extraordinary, life-altering opportunity or an elaborate setup for profound disappointment. 15 years of navigating the service industry had taught her to be perpetually cautious about extravagant promises from wealthy individuals who'd been indulging in expensive wine all evening. "I'll think about it," Diana said neutrally, playing it cool. "Right now, I really need to get back to work before my manager starts wondering why I've been standing at your table for the past 15 minutes. Of course, completely understandable." Marcus stood up from the table, pulling out his wallet once again. He discreetly laid several $100 bills on the table, far exceeding the amount required for the service provided, and for the education, he added with a wry smile, which was undoubtedly worth considerably more than the price of dinner. Diana pocketed the generous tips without any false displays of modesty. She genuinely needed the money far too much to let pride get in the way. "Thank you both very much. Please enjoy the rest of your evening." She walked purposefully back to the service station, acutely aware of 4 pairs of eyes following her every move. Antoine intercepted her with a concerned expression etched on his face. "Everything okay over there?" I saw Hartwell stand up abruptly. "Thought there might be some kind of trouble brewing." "No trouble at all," Diana said carefully, choosing her words deliberately. "Just an unexpectedly substantive conversation about complex economic theory and intricate issues of social mobility." Antoine's eyebrows shot up in surprise, indicating he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "At table 12? With Marcus Hartwell? Seriously?" At Diana's confirming nod, he chuckled in utter disbelief. "Mon Dieu, that man usually only discusses money and, of course, himself. What on earth happened over there? I think he initially tried to subtly humiliate me and accidentally started actively learning instead," Diana said dryly, a hint of amusement in her voice. She discreetly pulled out the business cards, studying them carefully in the ambient light. Marcus' card was printed on heavy stock, the raised lettering proudly announcing his prestigious position as CEO of Hartwell Capital Management. Rebecca Chen's card was simpler in design but equally professional, the Meridian Capital logo elegantly embossed in silver. "Are those what I think they are?" Antoine asked, his eyes wide with intrigue. "Business cards from a freaking billionaire and a powerful venture capital CEO? Given to a humble waitress who just lectured them on wealth inequality and pressing issues of social responsibility?" Diana shook her head slowly in wonder. "Either I'm about to be presented with an incredible, potentially life-changing opportunity, or this is an elaborate setup for the world's cruelest, most devastating joke. Call them both, immediately," Antoine urged her, his voice filled with encouragement. What's the absolute worst thing that could realistically happen? They simply ignore you and don't return your call. You're essentially no worse off than you are right now. The worst thing that could happen is that they give me a glimmer of hope and then abruptly snatch it away, crushing my spirits in the process. Diana corrected him quietly, her voice tinged with a hint of melancholy. I can easily handle being dismissed outright. It's the agonizing experience of being almost accepted and then ultimately rejected that completely destroys you from the inside out. Before Antoine could respond to that somber revelation, Michael suddenly emerged from the back office, his expression decidedly grim. Diana's stomach dropped like a stone. Someone had undoubtedly complained about her behavior at the table. Of course they had. She'd allowed her emotions to override her professional judgment, and now she was inevitably going to pay the price for her impulsive actions. "Diana, my office, please," Michael said curtly, his tone leaving absolutely no room for argument. Antoine squeezed her shoulder sympathetically as she reluctantly followed the restaurant manager through the bustling kitchen and into the small, cramped administrative space that served as his office. Michael closed the door firmly behind them and gestured for her to take a seat. Diana remained standing defiantly. "Before you say anything, I want to sincerely apologize for my behavior. What happened at table 12 was completely inappropriate and unprofessional. I allowed my personal feelings and beliefs to interfere with providing impeccable service, and that's simply inexcusable. If you feel that you need to let me go as a result of my actions, I completely understand and accept full responsibility." Michael stared intently at her for a long, suspenseful moment, then did something completely unexpected. He actually smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Diana, I'm not firing you. I'm actually trying to figure out what the heck just happened out there. Marcus Hartwell called me personally about 10 minutes ago. He personally called my freaking cell phone to specifically tell me that you provided the most valuable, insightful service he's ever received in any restaurant in his entire life. He specifically requested that you receive all possible accommodation moving forward and emphatically asked me to ensure that you're scheduled for all of his future reservations, without exception." Diana blinked in utter disbelief. "He what? He actually said that? He also left a ridiculously generous $3,000 tip and instructed me to split it evenly between you and the entire support staff for tonight," Michael added, leaning casually against his cluttered desk. "So, I'll ask you again, Diana, what exactly happened out there at table 12? Diana slowly sank into the chair she'd stubbornly refused to occupy just moments earlier, her legs suddenly feeling weak. "I simply gave him some unsolicited financial advice and maybe lectured him a little bit about systemic inequality, wealth responsibility, and the often blurry difference between genuine merit and unearned privilege." Michael's smile widened even further. "You lectured Marcus Hartwell, one of the most powerful and influential men in New York finance, about the pervasive issue of wealth inequality? In my own defense, he essentially asked for it, indirectly at least. He was being incredibly condescending and dismissive, and I reacted without thinking," Diana explained, still trying to process everything that had transpired. She nervously pulled out the 2 business cards. "He gave me these and told me to call him about potential opportunities with his family foundation." Michael whistled softly, clearly impressed. "The Hartwell Foundation. That's serious money doing serious, impactful work." Michael paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Diana, do you even remotely realize what this could potentially mean for you and your family?" "I'm honestly trying not to think about it too hard," Diana admitted cautiously. "Every single time I allow myself to genuinely hope for something better in my life, the universe invariably reminds me why hope can be a dangerous and ultimately destructive emotion. I'm 40 years old, Michael. I've learned the hard way to carefully manage my expectations and not get my hopes up unnecessarily." "You're 39, Michael corrected her with a slight, knowing smile. "And maybe it's finally time to stop managing your expectations and actively start taking some calculated risks in your life. That MBA didn't come cheap, either in terms of hard-earned money or personal sacrifice. When exactly are you planning to actually use it?" "When my daughter's education is financially secured, my mother's mounting medical bills are fully covered, and I have enough in savings to comfortably survive if things unexpectedly go completely wrong. Diana replied pragmatically. Stability has to come first, ambition has to come second. That's the unbreakable rule when you don't have a safety net of any kind. Michael's expression softened with understanding. Completely get it, Diana. I really do. But sometimes, the elusive safety net only appears at the exact moment you're finally willing to take the leap of faith. Not a moment before. He straightened up, his tone becoming more resolute. Take tomorrow off from work. Paid, of course. Use the precious time to seriously think about whether you want to make those phone calls or not. And Diana, whatever decision you ultimately make, you've absolutely earned the undeniable right to try. Please don't let fear steal that incredible opportunity away from you. Diana left Michael's small office in a daze, her mind simultaneously spinning through both endless possibilities and potentially devastating pitfalls in roughly equal measure. The kitchen staff enthusiastically congratulated her on the massive tip she'd received, their genuine happiness for her unexpected success warming something deep within her chest that had been frozen solid for far too many years. She finished her shift on autopilot, her hands methodically performing familiar tasks, while her racing thoughts continued to churn relentlessly. By the time she finally hung up her apron at 11 p.m., she talked herself both into and out of calling Marcus Hartwell at least a dozen separate times. The long, familiar subway ride home to Washington Heights afforded her a full 40 minutes to continue the exhausting internal debate. On one hand, a legitimate opportunity to finally advance her career, a potential breakthrough that could completely transform her family's financial future, and a chance to finally put her hard-earned education to good use. On the other hand, the looming possibility of public humiliation, the very real risk of losing crucial focus on her current fragile stability, and the emotionally draining process of desperately hoping for something better that might ultimately evaporate right before her very eyes. Her modest apartment was dark and quiet when she finally entered. Only the soft night light in the hallway cast long, eerie shadows across worn furniture that was undeniably clean but desperately in need of being replaced. Diana instinctively checked on her daughter first. Maya was fast asleep in her small bed, textbooks still haphazardly spread across her quilt, where she'd clearly been studying late into the night. Diana carefully moved the textbooks to the nearby desk, gently pulled the warm blanket up to Maya's shoulders, and pressed a loving kiss to her forehead. In the next bedroom, her mother's soft, gentle snoring indicated that her dialysis treatment had gone relatively well today, small mercies that she was eternally grateful for. Diana stood quietly in the doorway for a moment, watching the remarkable woman who'd raised her alone against all odds, who'd worked tirelessly at 3 separate jobs simultaneously to keep them both housed and fed, who'd never once complained about the constant sacrifices that were inevitably required. If Diana had learned the invaluable meaning of true resilience anywhere in her life, it was undoubtedly from watching her own mother relentlessly transform seemingly insurmountable obstacles into solid stepping stones through sheer grit and unwavering determination. In her own small, cramped bedroom, Diana carefully laid the 2 business cards on her nightstand and stared intently at them, as if they might magically transform into something else entirely. Marcus Hartwell's personal cell phone number, a tangible connection to a world of immense wealth and privilege. Rebecca Chen's direct line, a potential pathway into the exclusive world of impact investing and social venture capital. Tangible connections to a world that had spent countless years repeatedly telling her, both directly and indirectly, that she simply didn't belong. She tentatively picked up her personal cell phone, then just as quickly set it back down on the nightstand, paralyzed by indecision. She picked it up again, her heart pounding in her chest. The late hour made calling either of them tonight entirely inappropriate and unprofessional, but she could carefully draft a thoughtful, articulate message. Something professional and grateful, clearly indicating her strong interest without sounding desperate or overly eager. She cautiously opened her email application and began typing a message to Marcus Hartwell. Mr. Hartwell, thank you for the stimulating conversation this evening and for your generous. She immediately deleted it. Too formal, too distant, and far too generic. She tried again. Marcus, I deeply appreciated our discussion this evening and too familiar, far too presumptuous, and potentially off-putting. Diana abruptly set the phone aside in frustration and cautiously pulled out her ancient laptop instead. If she was truly going to do this, if she was actually going to take this potentially life-altering risk, she needed to be fully prepared and ready to articulate her unique vision. She meticulously opened her long-dormant files from Columbia, carefully searching for her master's thesis on sustainable community development through the innovative practice of impact investing. She'd spent 2 long years diligently researching, meticulously writing, and painstakingly refining this impressive body of work. The highly respected professor who'd advised her throughout the entire process had even deemed it publishable. But publishing inevitably required significant time, invaluable industry connections, and vast financial resources that Diana simply hadn't possessed at the time. She carefully read through the detailed executive summary, seeing her own innovative ideas with fresh, renewed eyes. Everything she'd passionately told Marcus Hartwell tonight was fundamentally grounded in this rigorous research, meticulously detailed case studies of successful interventions, in-depth analysis of why traditional philanthropy often failed to achieve its stated objectives, and fully developed models for accurately measuring social return on investment. It was undeniably good work, solid, innovative in specific places, and potentially groundbreaking. What if this was actually real? What if Marcus Hartwell genuinely wanted to understand the intricate systems that he'd never previously had to think critically about from a less privileged perspective? What if Rebecca Chin genuinely valued a unique perspective that actively challenged the conventional, often ineffective approaches? Diana's phone suddenly buzzed softly with a text message. Her heart inexplicably jumped with anxious anticipation until she saw that the message was simply from Antoine. Call them both immediately. Life is simply too short to spend wondering what if for the rest of your days. She smiled despite her lingering anxiety. Antoine had immigrated from France 15 long years ago with little more than his culinary school credentials and a measly $50 in his threadbare pocket. Now, he was the highly respected head sommelier at one of New York City's most prestigious and exclusive restaurants. He undoubtedly understood the delicate art of taking carefully calculated risks. Another text message arrived almost instantly. This one was from Michael. Took a huge chance on accepting a restaurant manager position roughly 20 years ago, even though I had absolutely no prior experience in the industry. Easily the best professional decision I've ever made in my entire life. Your turn to take the plunge, Diana. Diana nervously looked at the 2 business cards again, her mind racing. Tomorrow, she ultimately decided she'd make both phone calls tomorrow, with a clear head and meticulously prepared talking points. Tonight, she'd carefully refine her groundbreaking research, meticulously review her impressive credentials, and constantly remind herself that she had undeniably earned her rightful place at any table that she resolutely chose to approach. She worked diligently until 2 a.m., meticulously updating her master's thesis with the most recent economic data, adding current examples of demonstrably successful community development programs, and relentlessly strengthening her core arguments with fresh, compelling evidence. By the time she finally collapsed exhausted into bed, she had painstakingly crafted a concise, 15-page summary document that clearly captured her unique approach to impact investing in compelling and persuasive terms. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams a confused, chaotic mixture of exhilarating triumph and crushing disaster. She was confidently presenting her innovative ideas to stuffy corporate boardrooms, being rudely laughed out of sterile executive offices, successfully seeing her most ambitious ideas implemented on a grand scale, and helplessly watching those very same ideas fail spectacularly in real time. When her jarring alarm finally sounded at 6 a.m., she woke up feeling as though she'd just run a full marathon. Maya was already up and moving around, expertly making breakfast with the easy competence of a teenager who'd learned early on to be fiercely independent. "Mom, you look absolutely terrible. Did you even sleep last night?" "Rough night, to say the least." "Incredibly complicated night," Diana corrected her, gratefully accepting the steaming cup of coffee her daughter offered her. "Something significant happened at work last night. Something potentially very good, but also undeniably scary." Maya studied her intently with eyes that were far too knowing for a 14-year-old. "The scary, potentially good things are usually the ones worth doing in the long run, Mom." "When did you get so wise beyond your years?" Diana asked, genuinely impressed. I learn from the absolute best, of course, Maya replied with a playful grin. She grabbed her overloaded backpack. I've got a crucial debate practice session after school today. Then I'm going to Grandma's dialysis appointment with her. So, you essentially have the entire afternoon completely free to fully pursue whatever scary, potentially good thing has you looking like you've just seen a ghost. Diana hugged her amazing daughter tightly, suddenly overcome with emotion. I love you more than words can possibly express. You know that, right? Obviously, Mom. I'm amazing after all. Maya grinned mischievously. Now go be equally amazing, too. Show those fancy, privileged people what you're truly made of. After Maya left for school, Diana took a long, refreshing shower, carefully dressed in her one good interview suit, and deliberately sat down at her kitchen table with her phone and laptop. 9 a.m. Felt professional enough to make her first phone call. She decided to start with Rebecca Chin, logically figuring that a venture capital CEO might be more strictly businesslike and less emotionally complicated than the undoubtedly complex Marcus Hartwell. The phone rang 3 times before a crisp, efficient voice finally answered. Rebecca Chin speaking. Ms. Chun, this is Diana Mitchell. We briefly met last night at the Sterling Room. You generously gave me your business card and mentioned wanting to discuss my perspectives on community development finance. Diana, yes, of course. I'm so incredibly glad that you called me. Rebecca's voice immediately warmed noticeably. I was genuinely hoping that you would. Do you have some time to talk freely right now? Or would you prefer to schedule something a bit later? Diana's carefully prepared, rehearsed speech immediately evaporated from her mind. She'd fully expected to speak with an assistant, be politely asked to send her resume, and then face polite deflection and further delays. She hadn't at all anticipated such immediate and enthusiastic engagement. Yes, I actually have some free time right now. If that works for you, of course. Perfect, that works wonderfully for me. I've been giving considerable thought to your insightful comments last night regarding mixed-income housing development and innovative infrastructure investment. That's directly adjacent to some crucial work that we're currently doing at Meridian, but we've been struggling to find effective execution models that don't simply replicate existing, deeply ingrained problems. You specifically mentioned the critical importance of evidence-based decision-making and precisely defined performance metrics. Can you please elaborate further on what that actually looks like in practical terms? Diana quickly opened her laptop, pulling up her meticulously detailed research. The fundamental issue with most existing affordable housing programs is that they inadvertently concentrate poverty without simultaneously providing genuine pathways to sustainable economic mobility for the vulnerable residents. You inevitably end up with deeply impoverished communities that have severely limited access to quality education, adequate healthcare services, and meaningful employment opportunities. That ultimately creates multi-generational poverty cycles that are often virtually impossible to effectively break. Agreed completely, Rebecca said, her voice thoughtful. We've unfortunately seen that exact pattern play out repeatedly across various initiatives. So what's the viable alternative? Diana asked rhetorically. Start with strategic location selection based on comprehensive opportunity mapping. Diana explained, her initial nervousness gradually fading as she moved into her familiar area of expertise. You're specifically looking for areas with high-quality school districts, reasonable commute times to major employment centers, and existing or meticulously planned infrastructure. Then, you carefully develop mixed-income housing developments that ideally consist of roughly 30% market-rate units, 40% workforce housing, and 30% subsidized units. This approach creates intentional economic diversity right from the very start. That sounds incredibly expensive to implement, Rebecca noted, ever the pragmatist. The market rate units would essentially need to heavily subsidize the others, which is precisely why you need strong corporate partnerships and significant tax incentives to make the entire initiative financially viable. Diana continued, her voice becoming more confident. Opportunity zones offer valuable capital gains deferral for long-term investments in designated areas. New markets tax credits provide additional leverage, and if you can effectively partner with major employers who desperately need workforce housing near their facilities, you can often negotiate mutually beneficial cost-sharing arrangements. She could clearly hear rapid typing on the other end of the phone. Rebecca was actively taking detailed notes. The key is treating affordable housing as holistic ecosystem development, not simply as basic construction. Diana emphasized, every single project should proactively include community spaces, convenient access to essential healthcare services, affordable childcare facilities, and all of the critical infrastructure components that truly make sustainable work-life balance possible. And you should meticulously measure success not solely on the number of housing units built, but also on meaningful employment rates, improved educational outcomes, and vital health metrics. Essentially, you need to gather and analyze real, verifiable data on whether you're actually making a tangible, positive difference in people's lives. This is exactly the kind of thinking we've desperately needed, Rebecca said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. We've admittedly been approaching this far too narrowly, focusing primarily on the purely financial returns without fully understanding the comprehensive social infrastructure required for sustainable, lasting impact. Diana, I'd really like to invite you to come in for a more formal meeting in person. Can you make it this Friday afternoon, say around 2 p.m.? Diana's heart raced with excitement. Yes, absolutely, I can absolutely make that work. Excellent. I'll have my assistant send you all of the pertinent details right away. And Diana, please bring all of your research with you, everything that you've just described so eloquently. I truly want to see your models, your underlying data, and your compelling vision for how this could actually work effectively in the real world. We're currently in the process of raising a significant $200 million impact fund, and I sincerely believe that your unique perspective could prove invaluable in structuring our critical investments. After the exhilarating phone call finally ended, Diana sat staring at her phone in utter disbelief. A $200 million impact fund and a legitimate, in-person meeting with a respected venture capital firm. This was definitely not charity or misplaced pity. Rebecca Chin genuinely wanted and valued her unique expertise. She cautiously allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of unrestrained celebration before immediately moving on to her next, potentially even more challenging call. Marcus Hartwell's personal cell phone number somehow felt heavier in her hand, fraught with the previous night's tense confrontation and complex undercurrents. But she'd already come this far, she couldn't turn back now. She cautiously dialed the number. This time, a professional assistant answered the phone. Efficient, polite, and clearly accustomed to expertly screening incoming calls. Mr. Hartwell's office. How may I direct your call? This is Diana Mitchell calling for Marcus Hartwell. We met yesterday evening at the Sterling Room, and he asked me to reach out regarding the Hartwell Foundation. One moment, please, Miss Mitchell. Brief hold music began to play softly. Then, Miss Mitchell, Mr. Hartwell has been eagerly expecting your call. Please hold the line for him. Expected her call. Diana's hands tightened around her phone. Diana? Marcus' voice sounded noticeably different than it had last night at the restaurant. Less performative, more thoughtful, and undeniably more genuine. Thank you for calling me. I honestly wasn't sure that you would actually call. I almost didn't, Diana admitted candidly. I've unfortunately learned to be very cautious about opportunities that initially seem far too good to be true. Fair enough, Marcus replied understandingly. I'd probably feel exactly the same way in your precarious position. Marcus paused for a long moment. I actually didn't sleep very much last night. I kept thinking a lot about our conversation, about those pension holders whose retirements I essentially stole, and about what you said regarding power and the vastly different perspectives that people hold. I even called my CFO at 2 a.m. and told him to immediately pull all of the detailed documentation on that ill-advised acquisition. I suddenly wanted to actually see the real faces behind the impersonal numbers. Diana said nothing, patiently letting him continue to process his complex emotions. 247 people, Marcus said, his voice tinged with regret. You were absolutely right about their 19-year average tenure with the company. I thoroughly reviewed the actuarial data this morning. The money that we shamefully liquidated from their hard-earned pension fund would have rightfully provided an average of approximately $1,847 per month for their well-deserved retirements. We consciously extracted that significant value, shamelessly added it to the company's overall balance sheet to artificially make the business appear more profitable, and then conveniently sold it for over $30 million in pure profit. His voice had become flat, devoid of emotion. I literally took food directly off the tables of 247 innocent families, so that I could personally have a slightly better return on my already substantial investment. Yes, Diana said simply, acknowledging the gravity of his actions. You did indeed. I'm not asking you for forgiveness or absolution, Marcus continued, his voice tinged with vulnerability. What's done is undoubtedly done, and I obviously can't simply undo it at this point. But I can sincerely try to do considerably better going forward. Which is precisely why I desperately want to talk to you at length about the Hartwell Foundation. Currently has over $600 million in assets at its disposal. And honestly, we've been running it like a superficial vanity project for far too long. We somewhat randomly fund some scholarships for underprivileged students, passively sponsor a few glitzy galas for prominent charities, and casually write checks to various organizations with appealing branding and impressive marketing campaigns. There's absolutely no real impact measurement being conducted, no clearly defined strategic vision for the future, and essentially just a bunch of extremely wealthy people naively doing what they superficially think helps without actually knowing whether it even makes a tangible difference. And you genuinely want to change that? Diana asked, cautiously hopeful. I desperately want to no longer be the villain in other people's stories, Marcus said quietly, his voice tinged with genuine emotion. Or at least, I certainly want to be far less of one than I clearly am right now. You passionately talked last night about actively investing in sustainable systems that truly work, about effectively creating real pathways for individuals instead of just carelessly throwing money at seemingly intractable problems. The Hartwell Foundation desperately needs that kind of innovative thinking and fresh perspective. It needs someone who genuinely understands both sides of the vast economic divide and someone who is absolutely unafraid to challenge the conventional wisdom. Here's the American English translation and rewritten version, expanded and deepened as requested. Diana took a breath, contemplating the convergence of financial strategies and their effects on people's lives. What exactly are you proposing? She asked, her curiosity piqued. Come in for a meeting with the Foundation Board, Marcus replied. Present your ideas for how impact investing and community development could intertwine. If the board agrees, and I'm quite confident they will, we'd like to bring you on board as a strategic advisor. Initially, this would be a consulting role, but it could potentially evolve into a full-time position if everything aligns. The salary, he continued, would be commensurate with your education and experience, complete with a comprehensive benefits package and the autonomy to develop programs that truly make a difference. Define commensurate, Diana interjected, her business school instincts kicking in. She knew better than to accept vague promises about compensation. Marcus then stated a figure that caused Diana's breath to hitch in her throat. It was more than triple her current income. With that kind of money, she could aggressively tackle her student loan debt, ensure her mother's ongoing medical care, and finally build a solid foundation of savings. The financial insecurity that had shadowed her entire adult life could finally be dispelled. That's generous, Diana managed to say, trying to maintain her composure. It's the market rate for someone with your credentials working in strategic philanthropy, Marcus corrected her. Which you should know, given that you have an MBA from Columbia and a firm grasp of compensation structures. Don't undersell yourself, Diana. Last night, you demonstrated that you're one of the most astute individuals I've encountered in years. Own that. Diana felt tears welling up in her eyes and blinked them back, determined not to let them fall. When would you want to schedule this meeting? How about next Tuesday at 10 a.m.? Marcus suggested. I'll arrange for the entire board to be present. That includes my parents, my sister, and 3 outside advisors. They'll want to thoroughly vet you, ask probing questions, and likely challenge your assumptions. Do you think you can handle that? I've been dealing with people challenging my assumptions my entire life, Diana said with a touch of dryness. Usually, they just called them interviews where they found reasons not to hire me. Marcus chuckled, a genuine and hearty sound. Yeah, I'm starting to see that pattern. This will be different, Diana. I'll personally ensure it. After the call ended, Diana remained sitting in her quiet apartment, her mind racing to process the whirlwind of events that had just transpired. In the span of less than an hour, she had gone from a waitress with an underutilized MBA to a potential consultant for a venture capital firm and a strategic advisor for a $600 million foundation. Still didn't feel quite real. Meetings could go poorly. Offers could vanish. Boards could decide she wasn't the right fit. But for the first time in years, perhaps ever, Diana allowed herself to entertain a flicker of hope without immediately extinguishing it with a dose of pragmatism. The next 5 days unfolded in a flurry of preparation. Diana devoted every spare moment to honing her presentations, delving into research on both Meridian Capital and the Hartwell Foundation, and developing concrete proposals that skillfully balanced financial viability with meaningful social impact. Maya watched with a mixture of pride and awe as their small apartment morphed into a strategic war room, with papers and charts covering every available surface. "Mom, you're kinda scary when you're in full business mode," Maya observed on Wednesday evening, finding Diana surrounded by 3 laptops and a towering stack of printouts. "Scary good or scary bad?" Diana asked, her focus unwavering from the impact measurement matrix she was developing. "Scary like. I'm glad you're my mom and not my competitor." Maya handed her a sandwich. "Eat. You've been working for 6 hours straight." Diana accepted the food with gratitude. "I need this to be perfect. These people are giving me a chance that most people never get. I can't afford to waste it." "You won't." Maya sat cross-legged on the floor beside her mother's chair. "But Mom, you've already proven yourself. You earned your MBA while working full-time and raising me. You've kept us afloat through everything. You lectured a billionaire into reconsidering his entire worldview. You're not the underdog anymore. You're the expert they need. Act like it." Diana looked at her daughter, marveling at her wisdom. "How did you get so smart?" "Genetics and environment," Maya said with a grin. "Mostly genetics. You're welcome." On Friday afternoon, Diana stepped into Meridian Capital's offices in Midtown Manhattan, dressed in her interview suit and carrying a professional portfolio she had specifically purchased for this meeting. The reception area was a sleek expanse of glass and steel, adorned with contemporary art, and filled with the quiet hum of serious money being seriously managed. Rebecca Chin greeted her personally, a detail that Diana registered as significant. CEOs rarely met consultants in reception areas. They were typically ushered into conference rooms by assistants. The fact that Rebecca came down herself suggested genuine interest, not merely perfunctory courtesy. "Diana, welcome. Thank you for coming," Rebecca said, her handshake firm and professional. "We've gathered the senior investment team, including partners and 2 analysts. They're all eager to hear your perspectives." The conference room offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Manhattan. The cityscape stretched out in all directions, a tangible reminder of the immense capital and influence concentrated in rooms just like this one. 6 people stood as Diana entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. This was the moment of truth. Could she command respect from individuals who had spent their entire careers in this rarefied world? Diana set down her portfolio and met each person's gaze in turn. "Thank you for your time. I understand you're in the process of raising a significant impact fund and are grappling with execution models that can create truly sustainable outcomes. I'd like to propose a framework that effectively addresses both financial returns and measurable social impact." She opened her laptop and brought up her presentation. There was no need for preamble, no apologies for her background or perceived inexperience in this specific context. Just competence, confidence, and content that spoke for itself. For the next 90 minutes, Diana methodically walked them through her research. She presented detailed case studies of successful community development projects, analyzed the reasons why traditional affordable housing initiatives often failed, demonstrated how opportunity mapping could pinpoint high-potential investment areas, and presented mathematical models that convincingly proved that mixed-income communities generated better long-term returns than either purely market rate or purely subsidized developments. The questions began friendly but steadily grew more challenging. One partner pressed her on realistic timelines for achieving social return on investment. An analyst questioned whether her employment partnership model could be effectively scaled nationally. Another partner challenged her assumption that corporations would readily share infrastructure costs. Diana addressed each question with a combination of data, concrete examples, and occasional honest acknowledgement of uncertainty. I don't have perfect information on corporate participation rates because this model hasn't been implemented at scale yet, but pilot programs in Chicago and Denver suggest 40 to 60% employer engagement when presented with workforce housing within 15 miles of their facilities. That's statistically significant enough to build projections on. Rebecca observed more than she spoke, occasionally jotting down notes, her expression remaining inscrutable. When Diana finished, a profound silence filled the conference room. She resisted the urge to break it with nervous chatter, opting instead to wait for their response. One of the senior partners, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and even sharper questions throughout the presentation, leaned back in her chair. Ms. Mitchell, I've dedicated 23 years to impact investing. I've reviewed hundreds of proposals from consultants with impressive credentials and elaborate theoretical models. Yours is the first one that truly acknowledges the inherent complexities while simultaneously providing actionable frameworks. Where have you been hiding? Diana allowed herself a slight, knowing smile. Waiting tables at the Sterling Room and pursuing an MBA at night, which provided me with both the theoretical grounding and the practical observation of how wealth truly operates. The partner laughed. Best answer I've heard in years. She turned to Rebecca. Hire her today before someone else does. Rebecca's professional mask cracked into a genuine smile. I was hoping you'd say that. Diana, we'd like to bring you on as a senior consultant for the fund development. Initially, it would be a 6-month contract with the possibility of permanent placement. You'd be working directly with me and the investment team to structure our community development portfolio. She slid a folder across the table. The compensation package is outlined here. Diana opened the folder. The numbers were even better than what Marcus had offered, not by a substantial margin, but enough to indicate that they highly valued her expertise. The package included consulting fees, comprehensive health benefits, and a clause regarding potential equity participation if she transitioned to full-time employment. I need to be transparent about something, Diana said carefully. I've also been approached by the Hartwell Foundation. I have a meeting with their board on Tuesday. I don't know what they'll offer, but if both opportunities materialize, I'll need to consider them carefully. Rebecca nodded approvingly. Smart. You should absolutely consider all your options. I'll tell you this, though, Meridian is building something truly new, impact investing that genuinely measures impact, that holds ourselves accountable for outcomes, and that doesn't just make wealthy people feel good about themselves. If that vision resonates with you, I hope you'll choose to be a part of it. Can I have the weekend to review everything? Diana asked. Absolutely. We'd need an answer by Monday afternoon, if possible. Rebecca stood and extended her hand. Diana, regardless of your decision, thank you. That was one of the most impressive presentations I've seen in years. Diana left Meridian Capital feeling as though she were walking on air. She'd done it. She'd demonstrated her competence in the most demanding environment imaginable. And they wanted her not in spite of her background, but because of it, because her unique perspective held a value they couldn't find elsewhere. She called Antoine from the subway platform. They offered me the position. His whoop of joy echoed through the phone. I told you. Congratulations. When do you start? I haven't accepted yet. I have the foundation meeting on Tuesday. I need to see all my options before making a decision. She paused. Antoine, what if I'm making a mistake? What if I choose wrong? Then you'll learn something and choose differently next time, he said pragmatically. Diana, you've played it safe your entire life because you had to. Now you get to take risks because you're good enough that multiple organizations want you. That's not a problem. That's a privilege you've earned. Enjoy it. Saturday and Sunday passed in a haze of intensive research into the Hartwell Foundation's history, structure, and previous funding decisions. What Diana discovered was simultaneously encouraging and concerning. The foundation possessed tremendous resources but lacked a cohesive strategy, funding everything from arts programs to medical research to educational scholarships without any clear connective tissue. There were good intentions but no coherent vision, which meant either frustration or opportunity, depending on how much autonomy they would actually give her to reshape their approach. Tuesday morning arrived with surprising calm. Diana had anticipated feeling nervous, but instead she felt centered, prepared, and ready. She had done everything within her power to position herself for success. Now it was simply a matter of presenting her authentic vision and allowing the board to decide if it aligned with theirs. The Hartwell Foundation offices occupied the top floor of a building in the financial district, exuding an air of understated elegance and old-money discretion. Marcus greeted her in the reception area, his demeanor noticeably warmer and less performative than it had been at the restaurant. "Diana, thank you for coming. The board is assembled." He paused. "I should warn you, my father can be challenging. He built this foundation 40 years ago and has strong opinions about how philanthropy should work. Don't let him rattle you." "Challenging how?" Diana asked. "He'll test you, push back on your assumptions, and try to determine if you genuinely know what you're talking about, or if you're just regurgitating impressive-sounding theories." Marcus smiled slightly. "Honestly, you'll probably handle him better than I do. You don't have 30 years of family baggage clouding your responses." The boardroom was a classic space with wood paneling, leather chairs, and oil portraits of previous Hartwell generations watching over the current deliberations. 7 people sat around the conference table. Marcus, an older couple who could only be his parents, a woman in her 40s who resembled Marcus enough to be his sister, and 3 others who introduced themselves as outside advisors with backgrounds in education, healthcare, and financial management. Richard Hartwell, the foundation's founder, studied Diana with the intense focus of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly and accurately. He was in his mid-70s, still sharp-eyed and commanding despite his age. "Mitchell," he said without preamble, "my son tells me you criticized his business practices while serving him wine, then convinced him to reconsider fundamental assumptions about wealth and responsibility. That's either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. Which is it?" "Neither," Diana replied calmly. "It was honest, Mr. Hartwell. You asked what I'd do with $1 billion. I told you the truth instead of what I thought you wanted to hear. That's not bravery or foolishness. It's just refusing to perform deference. I don't feel the need to." Richard's eyes widened slightly. Then he laughed, a sharp bark of genuine amusement. "I like her already. Sit down, Ms. Mitchell. Convince me that this foundation should trust you with our family's philanthropic legacy." For the next 2 hours, Diana presented her vision for strategic, impact-focused philanthropy. She walked them through the same community development models she had shown Meridian, but adapted them specifically for foundation work. Where Meridian needed to generate financial returns for investors, the Hartwell Foundation could prioritize social returns, but both required rigorous measurement and accountability. Traditional philanthropy often fails because it treats symptoms instead of systems, Diana explained. You fund a scholarship program, which is wonderful for the 10 students who receive it, but the 90 who didn't get selected still face the same barriers. Meanwhile, the structures that made those scholarships necessary, inadequate public education funding, wealth-based college admissions, and credential inflation in hiring, continue unchallenged. "So, what's your alternative?" Richard challenged. "Don't fund scholarships? Let those 10 students suffer because we can't help everyone? Fund scholarships as part of a larger strategy that addresses systemic issues," Diana countered. "Partner with school districts to improve K-12 education quality so fewer students need remedial intervention. Work with employers to create apprenticeship and training programs that provide alternatives to 4-year degrees. Advocate for policy changes that reduce financial barriers to education. The scholarships become one tool in a comprehensive approach instead of an isolated gesture." One of the outside advisors, the woman with healthcare experience, leaned forward. "That's significantly more complex than writing checks to established organizations. It requires expertise we may not have in-house. It requires hiring people with expertise and giving them autonomy to develop programs." Diana agreed, "which is expensive and risky. But the current approach, safe, scattered funding with minimal impact measurement, is also expensive. It's just that the costs are hidden in opportunity cost rather than direct investment. Marcus's sister spoke for the first time. You're suggesting we completely restructure how the foundation operates. That's a tremendous undertaking. Why should we trust you to lead that change? It was the central question, the one Diana had known would come. She took a breath before answering. You probably shouldn't, Diana said frankly. I have an MBA and solid theoretical grounding, but I've never run a foundation. I've never managed a multi-million-dollar philanthropic portfolio. I've never navigated the complex relationships between funders, nonprofit partners, and community stakeholders. On paper, I'm dramatically underqualified for what you're considering. Richard's expression hardened. Several board members shifted in their seats. Marcus looked worried. But Diana continued, I have something most traditional philanthropic advisors don't. I've lived on the receiving end of systems that don't work. I know what it's like to work 3 times as hard for half the recognition. I understand how promising programs fail because they don't account for real-world constraints like childcare, transportation, or simply not having a cushion for unexpected emergencies. And I'm not invested in maintaining the status quo because the status quo has never served me particularly well. She met Richard's eyes directly. You asked if approaching your son was brave or foolish. The truth is, it was necessary. I was exhausted from watching wealthy people congratulate themselves for their success while dismissing everyone else's struggles as personal failure. Sometimes you reach a point where you stop caring about consequences and start caring about truth. That makes me dangerous to comfortable assumptions, which is either exactly what you need or exactly what you should avoid. You'll have to decide which. Silence descended. Diana watched the board members process her words, some nodding thoughtfully, others looking uncertain. Richard's expression was unreadable. Then he smiled. Not the polite smile of social nicety, but genuine pleasure. Damn, Marcus. You were right about her. He turned to the other board members. I vote yes. I haven't heard anyone talk about philanthropy with this kind of clear-eyed honesty in 40 years. We bring her on, give her resources, and see what happens when we actually trust someone to shake things up. Marcus's mother, who had been silent throughout, spoke in a soft voice that somehow commanded attention. I agree. But Ms. Mitchell, I want to hear your answer to one more question. What happens when you fail? Because you will fail sometimes. New approaches mean risks, and risks mean occasional disasters. How do you handle failure? Diana appreciated the question's sophistication. Anyone could talk confidently about success. How you thought about failure revealed character. I acknowledge it quickly, analyze it honestly, and adjust accordingly, Diana said. Failure in philanthropy isn't wasting money. That's just inefficiency. Real failure is continuing programs that don't work because we're too proud or stubborn to admit they failed. I'd rather try 10 innovative approaches and have half succeed than do the same comfortable thing that produces mediocre results forever. Marcus's mother smiled. That's the right answer. You have my vote. The others fell in line quickly after that. Marcus's sister, the 3 advisors, all expressing support with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Within 15 minutes, it was unanimous. The Hartwell Foundation wanted to hire Diana as their Director of Strategic Initiatives, with the authority to restructure their giving priorities and develop new programs aligned with measurable impact. The compensation package they offered was substantial, not quite as much as Meridian's, but it included opportunities for growth that the consulting position didn't provide. More importantly, it came with real authority. At Meridian, she'd be one voice among many, advising on a fund structure. At Hartwell, she'd be directing millions of dollars in giving, shaping the foundation's entire strategic vision. I need until tomorrow morning to make a final decision, Diana said. This is a life-changing choice, and I want to be certain I'm making it for the right reasons. Fair, Richard said. But Diana, let me offer one piece of advice. Don't just choose the safe option or the prestigious option. Choose the place where you can have the most impact, doing work that matters to you. Life's too short to play small. That evening, Diana sat with Maya and her mother at their small kitchen table. 2 offers laid out side by side like competing futures. Maya studied them with teenage seriousness, her mother with the hard-won wisdom of 7 decades. The Meridian position pays more upfront, Maya observed, but the foundation offers more long-term growth potential and direct impact. Money isn't everything, Diana's mother said quietly, though it helps. Lord knows we've done without enough that I understand its value. But baby, I didn't work 3 jobs raising you so you could spend your life chasing someone else's dollar. I did it so you'd have choices. This is your choice. What do you want? Diana stared at the offers, seeing not just compensation figures and benefit packages, but 2 different versions of her future self. At Meridian, she'd be building financial tools for impact investing, working with the wealthy to deploy capital more responsibly. Important work, necessary work, well-compensated work. At Hartwell, she'd be directly funding programs in communities like the one she'd grown up in, seeing her ideas transform into schools and housing and opportunities for people who looked like her, who struggled like she had, who needed someone in positions of power to actually understand their lives. I want to matter, Diana said finally. Not just to my family. I know I matter to you too. But to people I'll never meet. Those 247 workers whose pensions got liquidated, they'll never know my name, but they're out there somewhere struggling because someone with power made a choice that served profit over people. I want to make different choices. I want to prove that success and responsibility aren't mutually exclusive. Then you've already decided, her mother said with a knowing smile. You just needed to hear yourself say it out loud. Wednesday morning, Diana called Rebecca Chin first. Rebecca, I'm incredibly grateful for the Meridian offer. Working with your team, building that impact fund, it would be remarkable. But I've accepted a position with the Hartwell Foundation as their Director of Strategic Initiatives. Congratulations, Rebecca said warmly. Truly, you'll do amazing work there. And Diana, my door stays open. If you ever want to consult with Meridian on specific projects, or if the foundation wants to partner on community development investments, call me. Our goals align even if our organizations are different. I'd like that, Diana said, relieved that turning down an offer didn't mean burning a bridge. Thank you for taking a chance on me. It meant more than you know. Her call to Marcus was shorter. He answered on the first ring. I'm in, Diana said simply. When do I start? She heard Marcus's exhale of relief. Monday if you're ready. We'll need to process paperwork, set up your office, and introduce you to our nonprofit partners and community stakeholders. It's going to be intense. Good, Diana said. I'm done with easy. The next 4 days passed in a whirlwind of transition. Diana gave her notice at the Sterling Room, where Michael and Antoine threw her an impromptu celebration that involved the entire staff and possibly too much champagne from the wine cellar. Antoine toasted her success with tears in his eyes. I knew you were destined for more than this, he said. Though we'll miss you terribly. Who else will explain economic theory while balancing 6 plates? Visit me at the foundation, Diana urged. I'm serious. Your immigrant success story is exactly the kind of case study we should be learning from. Maya helped her mother shop for professional clothes appropriate for foundation work. A wardrobe upgrade that felt simultaneously exciting and slightly surreal. Diana kept touching the fabrics, unable to believe she was buying suits she didn't have to anxiously calculate the cost of. Mom, you're allowed to enjoy success, Maya reminded her gently. You earned this. On Monday morning, Diana Mitchell walked into the Hartwell Foundation offices, not as a visitor, but as an employee. Her office was spacious, with windows overlooking the harbor and a desk large enough for the 3 computer monitors the IT department had insisted she'd need. Richard Hartwell stopped by personally to welcome her. Don't make us regret this, he said with a gruff smile that softened his words. Make us proud instead. I'll do my best to do both, Diana replied. Regret and pride aren't mutually exclusive. Most meaningful change makes people uncomfortable before they appreciate it. Richard laughed. You're going to be trouble. I'm looking forward to it. The first 3 months were exactly as intense as Marcus had warned. Diana dove into analyzing the foundation's existing programs, identifying what worked, what didn't, and why. She met with dozens of nonprofit partners, community leaders, and program participants, asking uncomfortable questions and listening to even more uncomfortable answers. Many existing programs were well-intentioned disasters. Scholarship funds that selected students based on criteria that disadvantaged the most vulnerable, housing initiatives that created more problems than they solved, and job training programs that trained people for jobs that no longer existed. Diana documented everything, then presented her findings to the board with characteristic bluntness. We're wasting approximately 40% of our annual giving on programs that produce minimal measurable impact, she reported. Not because the people running them are incompetent, but because the fundamental design is flawed. We're funding what makes us feel good instead of what actually works. The board's reaction was mixed. Some members appreciated her honesty. Others bristled, referring to the implications that decades of philanthropic work might have been misguided. Richard, however, stood firmly behind her, granting Diana the authority to gradually eliminate ineffective programs and to develop new ones that were grounded in evidence rather than simply adhering to tradition. Within 6 months, Diana had already initiated 3 pilot programs: a workforce housing development in partnership with a manufacturing company located in the Bronx, a comprehensive educational support program that addressed not only tuition costs but also crucial aspects like childcare and transportation, and a small business incubator specifically designed to support women and minority entrepreneurs in underserved communities. Each of these programs incorporated rigorous data collection and meticulous impact measurement. Diana was a staunch advocate for transparency, publicly disseminating the results, including both successes and the inevitable adjustments. When the initial cohort of the business incubator revealed a success rate of only 40% after the first year, she didn't attempt to conceal the numbers. Instead, she meticulously analyzed the factors that had contributed to the shortcomings, refined the support structure, and successfully boosted the success rate of subsequent cohorts to 70%. Most foundations tend to bury their failures, Richard pointed out during a board meeting where they were reviewing the results from the first year. You're publicizing yours because failure is information, Diana responded matter-of-factly. If we pretend that everything functions perfectly, we fail to learn anything and, consequently, improve nothing. I would much rather be honest about our 40% failure rate and dedicate our efforts to improving it than to falsely claim 100% success while silently ignoring the individuals we failed to assist. By the second year, the Hartwell Foundation's innovative approach had garnered significant attention throughout the entire philanthropic sector. Diana was frequently invited to speak at conferences, publish articles, and offer advice to other foundations grappling with similar concerns regarding impact and accountability. She selectively accepted some of these invitations while declining others, consistently prioritizing the actual work itself over the potential for recognition. The Workforce Housing Project had evolved into a compelling case study in successful community development, with 127 families housed in high-quality apartments located near stable employment opportunities, and an impressive 93% of residents maintaining continuous employment after 18 months. The education support program had not only enabled 248 students to attend college, but had also helped them successfully complete their degrees, with 81% graduating on time, a remarkable figure when compared to the national average of 40% for first-generation students. Most importantly, Diana had cultivated something truly unprecedented. A foundation that measured its success not by the amount of dollars distributed, but by the tangible transformation of lives. It was a foundation that openly acknowledged its mistakes, treated community partners as equals rather than subordinates, and recognized wealth as a profound responsibility rather than merely a personal reward. On the second anniversary of her hiring, Marcus extended an invitation to Diana for lunch at the Sterling Room. She had intentionally avoided returning since her departure, as the memories were a complex mix of emotions, but she ultimately agreed. It felt like a significant act of closure. They were seated at a different table at Diana's insistence, and Marcus respectfully understood her reasoning. Antoine personally selected their wine, and Michael made a point of stopping by to congratulate Diana on the remarkable achievements of the foundation. I heard about the housing project, Michael said. My nephew was fortunate enough to be selected for one of the units. He's been diligently working at that manufacturing plant, saving money, and dreaming about buying his own place someday. You've truly changed his life, Diana. After Michael departed, Marcus studied Diana thoughtfully. Do you ever regret choosing this path over Meridian? They've achieved phenomenal success. That impact fund has deployed over $300 million. You could have been an integral part of that. Diana considered the question with genuine deliberation. I do think about it occasionally, she admitted. Rebecca's team is accomplishing incredible things, and yes, I could have contributed to something larger in terms of capital deployment. But, Marcus, I know your nephew's family personally. I've met the students who are benefiting from our education program. I've witnessed single mothers transforming into successful business owners through our incubator. The scale may be smaller, but the connection is far deeper. For me, that holds greater significance. For what it's worth, Marcus said quietly, my father told me just last week that hiring you was the best decision the foundation has ever made. And that's coming from a man who doesn't readily offer compliments. What about you? Diana asked. You've been different since that night. Changed in some way. Marcus nodded slowly. I've been striving to live with less certainty about my own sense of righteousness. It's an uncomfortable process. I remain a capitalist. I still believe in the power of markets and the importance of profit, but I'm making a conscious effort to hold those beliefs with greater humility, recognizing that my success isn't solely based on merit, and that other people's struggles aren't simply the result of personal failures. The system inherently favors certain individuals over others, and those of us whom it favors have responsibilities because of that advantage, not in spite of it. That's growth, Diana said. Uncomfortable growth is usually the most genuine kind. As they concluded their lunch, Diana surveyed the restaurant with newfound perspective. She had spent 15 years within these walls, simultaneously invisible and essential, observing the wealthy from a position of enforced subservience. Now, she returned as an equal, welcomed and respected, her voice carrying weight in rooms that once would have dismissed her without a second thought. But the most profound transformation wasn't in how others perceived her. It was in how she perceived herself, no longer as someone passively waiting for permission to matter, but as someone who had rightfully claimed her place at the table through competence, courage, and an unwavering commitment to doing work that truly made a difference. That evening, Diana returned to her new apartment, still situated in Washington Heights, still modest by Manhattan standards, but spacious enough to provide each member of her family with their own room and conveniently located in a building with an elevator, ensuring that her mother wouldn't have to navigate the stairs. Maya was at the kitchen counter, diligently working on her homework. Her mother was contentedly watching television in the living room, and everything felt precisely as it should be. How was lunch with Marcus? Maya asked without glancing up from her calculus problem. Good. Reflective. He was curious to know if I regretted my choice. Do you? Diana contemplated the workforce housing families, the graduating students, the small business owners, the pilot programs demonstrating promising results, the foundations now seeking advice after hearing about Hartwell's remarkable transformation. She considered the fundamental distinction between wealth and impact, between dollars deployed and lives changed. Not even a little bit, Diana said. I chose meaning over money, impact over prestige, and I would make the same decision again in a heartbeat. Maya smiled, returning her attention to her homework. Good, because I'm incredibly proud of having a mom who's changing the world, even if it occasionally means you're too busy to help me with my calculus. I'm never too busy for that, Diana protested. Let me take a look. As she leaned over her daughter's shoulder, patiently assisting her with the problem with the same unwavering determination that she applied to everything, Diana experienced a deep sense of contentment, something that 15 years of struggle had taught her to recognize and deeply value. This was true success, not measured by the dollar amount or the prestigious title or the corner office with breathtaking harbor views, although those were certainly appealing. But this, the ability to positively impact people's lives, to prioritize purpose over profit, to look her daughter in the eye and know that she had shown her what it truly meant to possess power and wield it responsibly. The billionaire who had jokingly requested financial advice had received far more than he had anticipated. But, in truth, so had the waitress who chose to speak her truth instead of playing it safe. Sometimes the most valuable investments aren't measured by the financial returns, but by the profound transformation of entire worlds, one meaningful conversation, one courageous choice, one pivotal moment at a time. This story serves as a powerful reminder that wisdom doesn't wear a uniform, and expertise isn't confined to corner offices. Every individual you encounter, the server pouring your coffee, the janitor cleaning your building, the cashier ringing up your groceries, carries within them a complete universe of knowledge, experience, and aspirations that you may know nothing about. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in our willingness to recognize and value each other's shared humanity. Diana's journey poignantly illustrates that success without responsibility is merely accumulation, that power without accountability is simply privilege, and that genuine change begins the moment we cease defending our preconceived notions and instead begin listening to perspectives that challenge them. The next time you find yourself tempted to judge someone based on their position rather than their inherent worth as a person, remember that you might be inadvertently dismissing the very wisdom that you need to hear. If this story resonated with you, inspired you, or prompted you to reconsider your perspectives on success and responsibility, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who might benefit from hearing this message. Because stories like Diana's serve as a constant reminder that change is possible when we possess the courage to speak our truth and the humility to listen to others. Together, we can collectively build a world where every voice matters, regardless of their position or their profession. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.